Welcome back to Dr. B Music Theory. I'm talking about enharmonic spellings and modulations. This is part 2 of this lesson. So let's continue from where we left off last time. So we talked about the enharmonic spellings. Now we're going to talk about what's often called reinterpretation. And this is a way in which modulations can happen to get you to unexpected places, create a sense of drama, but still make sense and not just sound random, right? So sometimes you want to do the unexpected, right? We have all these rules in music theory. This is what the ear expects. This is all very important to know. However, if you listen to a piece of music with 100% only what you expect, you will be bored out of your mind. So you do need some unexpected things. You do need to, quote unquote, break the rules. But when you're breaking the rules, you're not really breaking the rules. I really don't even like that. You're coming up with another rule that supersedes or allows for an exception and makes sense. So it's not like you're just breaking the rules and doing whatever. That's absolutely not what's happening. What you're doing is you're finding another way to do something unexpected but still makes sense to the human ear, to the human mind, to the emotional feelings that you're going to get from that. So, major minor 7s and German augmented 6 chords. We talked about this a little bit before about how the spellings, actually we didn't talk about this before, but the spellings of these are enharmonically equivalent. So let's take let's say a C7. So C, E, G, B flat. So again, that's a C7. And if we spell that as a German augmented 6, it would be C, E, G, A sharp. So the B flat becomes enharmonically an A sharp. We now have that German augmented 6 chord. So let's put this up on the staff and see how it would resolve, right? So we have the C, E, G, B flat. That's our C7 again. And we would expect that to resolve to the B flat is the 7th. It will resolve down by step to an A. That's a critical part to how that resolves. And it's going to go to an F chord, right? So we have F there, C. Let's put a F in the bass. Let's indicate F in our key signature here. C7 resolves to F major triad. The B flat, which is the 7th of the chord, resolves down by step to the A. Let's compare that now to our enharmonic version, the German augmented 6, which would be C, E, G, A sharp. Now, here, we are not in the key of F major anymore. We are in the key of some kind of E. Let's say E minor, okay? In which case, actually, if I write E minor, lowercase e, which means that we would have to have 1 sharp in our key signature. That means this is a German augmented 6. The C resolves down. This A sharp now resolves up. Notice that it was a B flat in our C7. It resolved down here as an A sharp, and harmonically sing, but it resolves differently. And then we would maintain this. We could go to a 1-6-4 chord. And then this can resolve to a 5 chord, as it would likely do, right? So that really, I think, should demonstrate why spelling something enharmonically can lead you into different keys. And that's very exciting. And it's very often that major minor 7 becomes you're going along and it's a major minor 7, and then it becomes the German augmented 6 in a new key, a distant related key. So, and it can go either way. The German augmented, you could come to a German augmented 6 and then pretend that it's really a major minor 7 and go into another key. And as we know, major minor 7s offer a ton of flexibility because It could be a 5 chord in the key you're in, or it can be a secondary dominant function. So you could have 5 of 4 that becomes a German augmented 6 in another key, and you have a lot of really exciting possibilities. It's interesting that usually, like, you can go either direction in terms of the reinterpretation, but typically you'll go along and you'll find some kind of major minor 7, whether it be 5/7 or a secondary function like 5/7 of 4, and that'll become the German augmented 6 of your new destination key, your new modulation. Less common where you're going along, you hear a German augmented 6, and then it becomes a 5/7. I think part of that is kind of like the direction of drama. So 5/7 is not super dramatic. Even a 5/7 of a secondary function, it's a little bit more dramatic, right? So level of drama, 1. More drama. German augmented 6, even more. So it makes more sense that you find this and then the surprise key. You have this kind of escalating sense of drama. Here, the German augmented 6 is already dramatic, so that if you were to then modulate to another key that's unexpected, it's like the drama already happened here, and then it kind of continues when you modulate somewhere unexpected. So that happens, but a lot of composers like to say, okay, I'm moving along, we get to, let's say, drama, and then we modulate somewhere unexpected, super drama. So it's that major minor 7 is being kind of less drama, less dramatic than the German augmented 6, and how that affects modulations. I think that's the reason why typically the major minor 7 gets reinterpreted as a German augmented 6 as opposed to the other way. But both are allowed. So this is one area that you will see and can use, and you should definitely experiment with this. So let's take a look and see how that can go, right? So we have, let's say we're here in our key of F major, and that would be one way for us to get to E minor, which would be very unexpected. But let's take it and say instead we're in the key of F major, and we get to, we have an A7, right? Which would be our 5/7 of 6. We'd expect it to go to a D minor triad if we were just using secondary functions. But instead, let's pretend this is a German augmented 6, right? So we know that the G becomes an F double sharp, so A, C sharp, E, F double sharp, and German augmented 6, so this is now a German augmented 6. It's no longer, this has become, the 5/7 of 6 has become a German augmented 6. We then know that we're going to be resolving things down. So A flat, I'm sorry, not A flat, G sharp, right? So we're going to go down to G sharp and a G sharp, right? And we're looking at like a C sharp minor or C sharp major. Let's make it minor, so it makes it nice and dramatic. That becomes our 1/6/4, 5, that's 1. So we now modulated from F major to C sharp minor, which is super, super dramatic. We go. That's what it might sound like. Again, let me do that again and I'll tell you what it is. 1, 4, 5, 1. 5/7 of 6, which we would expect to go to 6, but instead, we pretend it's a German augmented 6, and all of a sudden the skies open, the drama happens, and we go 1/6/4 to 5 to 1. So that's just a really exciting modulation, but it still makes sense. There's still, the human ear still hears the flow, the voice leading works, and that's really, really important for having things make sense. Again, I'm going to say it again because it's so important. Breaking the rules doesn't mean you just do whatever random thing. What it means is you've come up with another rule that makes sense. You've come up with an alternative, something that overrides the expectation, but still makes sense. So it's another type of rule. Other reinterpretation that's very common is the diminished 7 chord, okay? And this composers use a lot. So let's kind of take a closer look and see how that would work. Okay, so a diminished 7 chord. Let's start with, let's say, how about we just go E, G, B flat, D flat. So this would be an E diminished 7 chord, which we would expect to find in the key, an F, usually F minor. So it goes up a half step, right? So stacked in thirds. The diminished 7 chord is a really interesting chord because of its symmetry, right? So we have a minor third, E to G, up a minor third, G to B flat, up a minor third, B flat to D flat to E. If we look at that interval, let's put this down here and look at D flat to E. That is a second, but it is an augmented second. And augmented seconds are enharmonically the same as minor thirds, right? So when we're dealing with a diminished 7 chord, we can go all minor thirds, keep going, just straight up, all minor thirds. It has that symmetry. Because of that, we can rewrite this chord, keeping the exact same sound, the exact same pitches, but just spelling it enharmonically differently. So instead of E diminished 7, what if it were a G diminished 7 chord? It would be G, B flat, D flat. So you see all those are in common. And instead of E, it's now F flat. But we know E is enharmonically the same as F flat. And it's not going to sound any different when we play this chord. You can't tell, is that a E diminished 7 chord or a G diminished 7 chord in second and third inversion. You just can't tell without the context of what's going around it, right? So it could be a G diminished 7 chord. And we can continue that, right? So if we go and start on the B flat, we'll write that here, B flat, D flat, F flat, A double flat, right? So here, A double flat is the same as saying, enharmonically the same as saying G. And we can then say, okay, and the enharmonics don't stop there, right? We could simply say, well, instead of calling this B flat, let's call it A sharp, C sharp, E, G, and call it an A sharp diminished 7. That's like another way that we could be looking at enharmonics. Not only rearranging which of these notes is the root of the chord, because again, in any diminished 7 chord, any one of those notes could be the root if you write it enharmonically differently. So let's continue, but that's a little sidetrack there. But now let's say instead of, we take the D flat, that's our last option, F flat, A double flat, and then here we would have to have, well, here's where we get in trouble. We can't have quite that many flats. So we would never write it quite like that, right? We would never have C triple flat. We would definitely be writing this as C sharp, E, G, B flat, right? We wouldn't have that. But again, we're just changing, you have the same pitches, but that enharmonic difference. And what that means is that, you know, if you see an E diminished 7 chord, and let's just rewrite that, right? So E diminished 7 chord, you'd expect that to go to F. And a G diminished 7, you'd expect to go to some kind of A flat. And let's say we call it A sharp diminished instead of B flat diminished. We'd expect that to go to some kind of B. And C sharp diminished, 7. We'd expect that to go to some kind of D. So you hear this sonority, it could go to F minor, A flat minor, B minor, D minor. Any one of those would make sense to the ear because this chord makes sense. All these progressions make sense of what we've already talked about. What happens though is like you're moving along in one of those keys and then you come to a diminished 7 chord and all of a sudden you can go to many, many distant keys. And again, just like we were talking with the major minor 7, it doesn't only have to be 5/7, it could be a secondary function. Same with this. The 7 diminished 7 could be a 7 diminished 7 of, which the amount of possibilities just explode in terms of what you can modulate to when you do that. Like the number of permutations is just staggering. What's one of the beautiful things about music is you have so many options still within a system of quote-unquote rules. So these two, the major minor 7 being reinterpreted as a German augmented 6, very commonly used. The diminished 7 chord being reinterpreted through enharmonic spellings is another thing that's very, very common. There are 2 other chords that can be reinterpreted, but that's very uncommon. That's the augmented triad and the French augmented 6. So I'm just gonna, for the sake of thoroughness, just show you why that is. But these, again, don't use these in your writing too much. Don't expect that as much when you're analyzing. Really focus in on the major minor 7 German augmented 6 in reinterpretation and the reinterpretation of the diminished 7th chords. Augmented triads, the reason that you can do that is they are symmetrical, just like the diminished triad is. So if I have G, B, D sharp, that is a G augmented triad. And if I rewrite that to be B, D sharp, F double sharp, so the G becomes a F double sharp, that's a B augmented triad. And if I make that D sharp and E flat and just go E flat, G, B, that is an E flat augmented triad. So G augmented triad, B augmented triad, E flat augmented triad, and if I were to just play this, I could say, look, that's a G augmented triad. That's a B augmented triad in second inversion. That's an E flat augmented triad in first inversion. You wouldn't be able to tell without a context of chords, like how it resolves is the only way you would be able to tell which one it is. So let me do that again. Which one is this? Is this a G augmented triad, a B augmented triad in second inversion, or an E flat augmented triad in first inversion? You can't tell. You just can't tell without me resolving it somewhere and setting a context in the key. So that's how that would work. If we look at let's say a French augmented 6 chord, so let's have it be this, okay? So A flat C, D, F sharp. These are gonna resolve out like so to a G. So let's say we're in the key of C. This would be French augmented 6. We could go to 5, right? So if we look at this as our French augmented 6, we can reorder this to the following. We can make the D F sharp, make this A flat a G sharp, and make this, so we have the F sharp there, the D there, the A flat becomes that, and the C becomes a B sharp. So C becomes B sharp, A flat becomes G sharp. And now we have a French augmented 6, but we're in another key. We're in the key of F sharp. This is a French augmented 6 in the key of F sharp. Notice that the relationship between these two keys is a tritone. And you'll notice that the French augmented 6, one of the things that makes it really, really unique in sound is it has that augmented fourth tritone interval as part of its makeup. It's one of the things that makes it really French, that French sound. And so it's interesting that these chords can be enharmonically reinterpreted, and you can take yourself into a completely different key, a tritone away. So, enharmonic reinterpretation, major minor 7, German augmented 6, very common. Diminished 7s, very common. Less common, using augmented triads and French augmented 6 chords. So let's take a look at what this would look like in a score of one of the masters, right? So taking a look at this first one, we have a whole bunch of sharps in our key signature. But let's start with our lead sheet symbol analysis. We first have a G major triad in first inversion, followed by A minor triad in first inversion, followed by G major triad with D in the bass, second inversion, to a D7 chord, resolving to a G major triad. So that is very clearly in the key of G, a very clear cadence. So I'm going to write it first, our lead sheet symbols, G over B, A minor over C, G over D, D7, bar line, to G. Then we'll analyze that as 1-6, 2-6, 1-6-4, 5-7 to 1. So that's how we start. And this is the measure where it gets interesting, right? So here we have as our cadence, and then we have this series of 16th notes, and then something that's going down in what looks like the tenor, right? So what is happening there? Because by the time we get to that cadence I just stopped on, that's very clearly in B major. So we have this kind of this mystery thing here. Then we have right here, looks like a B triad with F sharp in the bass, right? So I'm not going to do the first measure where all the 16th starts. I'm going to leave that part. I'm going to move forward. We have that followed by an F sharp 7 on the third beat. And then when we go to the next system, a very clear B major triad. So this sounds like 1-6-4, 5, 1 in the key of B major. And that's exactly what it is. 1-6-4, 5-7, 1. So how did we go from the key of G to the key of B? How did we make that? And it happens right here in this measure. We have on beat 3, G, D, E sharp, just arpeggio with the B in there. So we have written right there, let me write it out, G, D, E sharp, and above that we have B, D, B, D. So we already have those, so we don't need to rewrite that. So this here is our sonority, and we'll stack it and as close as possible in thirds, which we can't do. Well, actually, we shouldn't do. We should. So here's the crux, right? This is our major minor 7 / German augmented 6 chord. So we either write it as G, B, D, F natural, or we're going to be writing it as G, B, D with an E sharp. This is the augmented 6th chord. So here would be German augmented 6th chord, and this would be 5/7 chord. So the way it's written in the score is as a German augmented 6th chord. So but a German augmented 6th chord in the key of B major. But as your ear is going along, your ear is going to hear this more like a G7. Your ear is going to hear it like a G7. Your ear is going to hear it as a 5/7 of 4. Okay? Your ear hears it that way, but it doesn't resolve that way because it ends up resolving as if it were instead a German augmented 6th chord. When you hear this G major triad and the descending, almost comes like it's either a 1 major 7 or a passing tone, you then hear, this sounds like G7. Right? If I was just playing along in a piece and that's what you would expect. You'd expect going to 4, 5/7 to 4 to 4. But that's not what happens here. We get to that point, and it's written in this case, it's written in the key of where you're going to. It's written that way. And it ends up resolving to something very unexpected. We get to go to, then we cadence strongly to show that we've actually done something and gone to another key. So let me reiterate. We're going along. It sounds like a 5/7 of 4, but it actually is written like a German augmented 6 and then takes us to this distant key. The reason the ear likes this and accepts it is because this is very common and expected. And this is very common and expected. And so we have this little shift that happens of, so this is not, the jumping from 1 to this 1/6/4 would be super unexpected and strange. But each of these little links is expected. So our ear says, oh, what a nice surprise. What a exciting, dramatic change of harmony. And that's really where a lot of the emotion in music comes, is with these unexpected modulations. So definitely worth exploring. So that's a great example in the literature of how the major minor 7 and the German augmented 6 can be reinterpreted to allow you to go to different keys. So now let's take a look and see how those things can be different for how the diminished 7 chord can be reinterpreted. So in this example, we're going to start in the 3rd measure and take a look there. We have, we just continue up an A major triad. So we have an A major triad right here in this last chord of that first system. And then we move to, by the end of that measure, we have like an Alberti bass, which is something Mozart used a lot. And we continue with that on the next system. With the, so that looks like an E7 with B in the bass here. So I'm going to put that E7 with B in the bass for that measure. Then we have something that looks a little bit complicated. And again, if you want to test your analytical skills, pause it on the score and see if you can come up with their answers, and then press play and see what I've come up with. So you can compare the two. Our left hand goes, And we get, very slowly, there's some non-chord tones in here. So determining which ones are the non-chord tones is going to make your life a lot easier if you can do that. So the short of it, the quick of it, is that all of these are accented, are accented like retardations of that. So non-chord tone, chord tone, or you could also say accented passing tone possibly. So it's always non-chord tone to resolution. So if we do that, we can see that's an A major triad in first inversion, E major triad in first inversion, A major triad, D major triad in first inversion. And again, I just took out all the non-chord tones. So let me do that again so you can hear it. We've got with those, a little bit slower. So that's a great example of how non-chord tones can be used to make something very, very interesting. So we're getting a lot of, by doing any kind of analysis, even though we haven't gotten to our enharmonic modulation, all analysis can be very, very beneficial. So we'll spend the time to do that here together. So that measure, A major triad with C sharp in the bass, E major triad with G sharp in the bass, A major triad, D major triad with F sharp in the bass, bar line. We then get in the bass, and we have this. So A major triad, E in the bass, lower neighbor, upper neighbor, passing tone, new chord, E major triad, E7 with D in the bass, there. So we can write out that, A major triad with E in the bass, going to E, and then E7 with D in the bass. And then we look at this next measure where we have in our left hand, that's very clearly an A major triad. Let's look at what that arpeggio is. Right? That's all A major triad, so A major triad with C sharp in the bass. We then look at our next system. And this is where we start to see some chromaticism, right? We see a C sharp, B flat, E, B flat. We get this, or start rather. So that's all looks like a C sharp diminished triad, right? So we'll write it like that. C sharp diminished triad. And again, be aware, C sharp diminished, this is where we were just talking about as being a place where you might find some enharmonic things. And if we look at where it goes, in the second half of that measure, right, that's a C7 chord. So that's an unexpected, so we know something's going on right here. C sharp diminished 7 to C7, something's going on there. And we're going to have to take a closer look at that. But let's continue as we go. We then have, I'm sorry, in our left hand, all that is F major arpeggios in both hands. So F with C in the bass. Then we go back to what is obviously a C7. And then it looks like that looks like an F major triad. And let's look at all these 16th notes. Neighbor tone, neighbor tone. So if we look at all those 16th notes, even though there's naturals and some sharps, that should not scare us. We can see that it's primarily just the arpeggio with some lower neighbor tones. All F major triad with C in the bass. Then we continue and we say, okay, the next measure, next system, we have, again, that looks very much like we've had before. So a trill, lower neighbor, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone. Most of these are chord tones. You know, pay attention as a composer that the majority of notes you are hearing are chord tones. The non-chord tones definitely are not of higher number or percentage in the piece. We then move up to our next measure, and that looks like it's got some chromaticism in it for sure. C sharp, A sharp, E. And if we analyze that, we stack A sharp, C sharp, E, G natural. That would be an A sharp diminished 7 chord. Diminished 7 chords, again, something we're going to look closely at. And then we go to the next harmony. In the left hand we have, that's very clearly a B minor triad with D in the bass. If we look at the right hand, 1, 5, lower neighbor, 5, accented passing tone, chord tone, passing tone, chord tone. Yeah, that all makes sense as a B minor triad. Then in our next measure we get, it looks like A major triad with E in the bass. Okay, so A major triad with E in the bass. Going to, and this might look a little confusing, but here's where playing on piano using your ear helps a lot, right? So it sounds like 1-6-4. If I look at just the left hand, that looks like E7, which is what I would expect. The C sharp is not what I expect. I don't know what to do with that, but look, it resolves to B. So we can say that the C sharp is a non-chord tone that resolves down by step to the B. And that is just simply an E7 chord. And then we go to A major triad. Alrighty, so what's at work here? We've analyzed all the chords, but how do we make sense of all this? What keys are we in? Our key signature is 3 sharps. When we start with an A major triad, so considering us in the key of A is very reasonable, and we start with a 1 chord. All very reasonable. We end in A, so again, that makes a lot of sense. We then go here to an E7 over B, so a 5-4-3 chord. Good chord progression, expected. Then 5 tends to go to 1, and yes it does. It would be 1-6 in this case. To 5-6, to 1, to 4-6. All of those super common chord progressions, nothing crazy. To 1-6-4, 5, 5-4-2. Again, nothing, nothing's fancy here. Nothing fancy. And then we get to this 7 diminished 7, okay? Or not 7, yeah, 7 diminished 7 of maybe something, right? So if we just were to analyze this as in our key, right? We would call this 7 diminished 7 of 4, right? C sharp diminished 7 typically would then resolve up to a D chord, which would be the 4 chord in our key of A major. We don't go there. We absolutely don't go to the C7, to a D chord. We go to a C7. So then the question is, what's going on? Has this C sharp 7 chord been reinterpreted? And so if we look at that and say, okay, C sharp diminished 7, C sharp diminished 7, could be C sharp diminished 7 is one way to look at it. E diminished 7 is another. G diminished 7 is another. And B flat or A sharp diminished 7 would be yet another way to look at it. All these are possible reinterpretations. Well, if C sharp we'd expect to go to D, E to F, G to A flat, A sharp to B. Well, do we go to any of those keys? Well, we go to C, that's none of them. And after that, we go to F. Well, F is one of our options here. And one thing that's common is that a diminished 7 chord will often lead, actually I should circle this rather, to what I call a corresponding 5-7 chord. So anytime you have a diminished 7 chord, there's a corresponding 5-7 chord. So let's talk about that. What happens in this case, we say E, G, B flat, D flat. The 7th of your diminished 7 chord goes down a half step and creates the 5-7 chord. So 7. So this diminished 7 chord, the E diminished 7, then goes to a C7. E, G, B flat, D flat. That D flat steps down by step, a half step, to create a C7. And that these then go to F, right? Because 7 diminished 7, E diminished 7 goes to F, C7 goes to F. This is a very common little formula. So let's look at all our permutations, right? So the C sharp diminished 7, if it was going to go to its corresponding 5-7, we would have C sharp diminished 7, and our pitches are C sharp. Let me write it out and give a little more space here. I'm going to put that. I'll put that right here on the side. So C sharp, E, G, B flat. The B flat goes down a step, right? The 7th of your diminished 7 goes down a half step. So it's going to become an A7. C sharp, E, G, A natural. So C sharp diminished 7 would become an A7, which goes to D. E diminished 7 would become a C7, which goes to F. G diminished 7, G, B flat, D flat, F flat. That F flat goes down a half step. I'm sorry, yeah, F flat goes down a half flat to E flat, so that means an E flat 7, right? So G diminished 7 to E flat 7. The A sharp, C sharp, E, G. That G goes down a half step to F sharp, becomes an F sharp 7. And that would resolve to B. So you'll see that there's the diminished 7 and its corresponding 5-7 chord. Again, 7 diminished 7, 5-7 share 3 out of 4 notes. And that 7th of the diminished chord goes down a half step to create your 5-7 chord. So that's what's happening here. We're really reinterpreting this 7 diminished 7 of 4 in our old key to become a 7 diminished 4-2 in our new key. Okay, so 7 diminished 4-2, I'm sorry, yeah, 7 diminished 4-2 in our new key, which is F major. So let me move things around so this can be notated a little bit better. You put that step there to indicate modulation. You say 7 diminished 4-2, because that now that C sharp is it's really not a C sharp diminished 7 anymore. It's really an E diminished 7. That's how we're reinterpreting. C sharp becomes the E diminished 4-2, and it becomes 7 diminished 4-2 in our key of F major, so it's not of anything. So just 7 diminished 4-2, going to 5-7. And we can jump around between those functions, right? 7 diminished to 5, 7, that's totally fine, right? And then we have 1-6-4, 5-7, 1-6-4, and we have the C7 here, so we're going to 5-7 again, and then we get to an A sharp diminished chord, A sharp diminished 7, but this does not really work in our key of F major. It doesn't make a lot of sense. We would not see that. But if we look at A sharp diminished 7, look that it's just an enharmonic spelling of our C sharp diminished 7 and our E diminished 7. So let's see what's happening here. This is how we get back to A major. We have a very clear 2, 1-6-4, 5-7-1. 2, 1-6-4, 5-7-1. But how do we do it? Well, this A sharp diminished 7 is very clearly a 7 diminished 7 of 2 in the key of A. And actually it's a 6-5 because of the inversion. Right? So in the key of A, it's that. In the old key, in the key of F major, we would call it a 7 diminished 7 of 6. Maybe not root position. It's essentially like a C sharp diminished 7, right? C sharp diminished 7 is how we would expect to see that in our key of F major. So that's some pretty complicated stuff, and you might need to back this up and write it out for yourself on staff paper to make sure you're really understanding how those things work. But this is a great example of how we start in A major, we temporarily modulate to the key of F by reinterpreting the C sharp diminished 7 into an E diminished 7, and how we then take that and reinterpret that into an A sharp diminished 7 to get us back to the key of A major. So I hope that sounds as exciting to you as it does to me, because the possibilities that opens up for composing are just fantastic. So go forth and enjoy. Thank you.